pass rushers. We always talk about quarterbacks and pass rush on here. That's championship formula. That's how you win in this league. So looking at pass rushers, I was like, okay, let me go to our tried and true stat that we've talked about forever, which is if get off is
Mhm.
everything. One of the most important factors for a pass rusher. We've talked about this a bunch. It's been documented over the years. That's a key indicator. So when we go back and look at the get off leaders, and I did this with just edge guys. So let's just focus on edge leaders. And I put in the computer, okay, let's go minimum of 5 sacks. So you got to have some production here.
Mhm.
And then let's look of those guys above 5 sacks. There's a whole host of them. Who has the elite get off? And some interesting little nuggets that I want to drop on you here. Number one, Myles Garrett was number one on the list. That shouldn't be a surprise.
Mm.
We know about how elite he is. Number 3 was Josh Sweat. Number 4 was Trey Hendrickson. 5 is Justin Houston. Then you have TJ Watt, Carl Lawson, Von Miller, and Ngakoue, who's been on this list forever. He's always had a great get off. Epinesa, kind of a surprising one there.
Mm.
And then Nick Bosa. So that's kind of that top group. And then Bosa's followed by Max Crosby. Now, I left out number 2 on purpose, and I left out the one right after Max Crosby on purpose. So number 2 on the list, if you think about guys getting off the rock, coming off the edge, number 2, the second best get off in the NFL was Chris Jones. Think about that.
Wow.
At his size, they play him out on the edge. Remember, it was all like, why would you
Yeah.
play him out? He's so
Mhm.
dominant and destructive on the inside. Dude, look at the second best get off in the NFL behind Myles Garrett at that size that he is. Six
That's
foot
crazy.
six, 300 pounds. Like, that's insane. That shows you just what an athletic freak that dude is.
Yeah, it is, and it's funny, you mentioned get off, and we talk about, the number one thing when it comes to pass rush is how quick do you get off the ball because it's immediate pressure on the offensive tackle when you're dealing with an edge guy. And get off is not only the athletic explosiveness that you show coming out of your stance, but it's the ability to anticipate the snap count, it's the ability to kind of see it and key it and go. It's the little tips that you get off the ball squeeze and all that other stuff. Um, it is one of the things that when you look at elite pass rushers, it's hard to be elite if you don't have great get off. I mean, it's just too hard. And the guys who have exceptional get off, like the Von Millers of the world, when Von was in his prime, those guys are nearly impossible to block over the course of a game. And so when you bring up Myles Garrett, I'm not surprised. Chris Jones, yes, a surprise. But to me, it's the other guys that you bring up, the guys that weren't necessarily first round pick, the Josh Sweats of the world,
Yeah.
that you bring up, Max
Double
Crosby,
digit sacks last
um,
year for Josh Sweat.
Trey Hendrickson, those guys that come off, guys that have been able to put it up. And so sometimes when you see those guys at the top of the sack leader chart, you wonder, hey man, is this a 1-year wonder? Is this a fluke? But now when you dive deeper, you kind of dig deeper into the stats and the next gen stuff, you see, nah, maybe somewhere along the line we missed this when it came to looking at the athletic profile, that these guys were exceptional when it came to their ability to generate explosive power at the first 10 yards.
Well, and I mentioned, okay, there's some Easter eggs, maybe some secret superstars. Well, Chris Jones, not that's a known
Mm-mm,
that's a known quantity.
mm-mm.
So that's not where I'm getting with this because that led me down a different path. So I'm looking at next gen stats and I'm looking at this other stat they have there, and it's called like time to hit, right? So what's the time that
Mhm.
elapses between when the snap and when you hit the quarterback? So in other words, this is a way where we can look at not only your get off, but then your close and then the third part, which I was talking to a defensive line coach about, and he brought up a great point about this, about how, we always talk about instincts and hands and get off always things. He said, one of the things that they've learned and that you look at that the elite guys have, Buck, is they take an excellent rush path. So in other words, understanding angles, how can we get home and how can we win
Mhm.
now? The ball's never come out faster than it is right now. I mean, teams are getting the ball out of their hands. They're trying to protect their quarterbacks. The college game is infiltrated in the NFL game. You're getting the ball out. So this stat was fascinating to me. So I'm like, okay, let's look at this and let's go time to hurry. And then let's marry that up and see, okay, maybe that's going to marry up with some guys with big time get off. So time to hurry or time to hit, I should say. The number one guy was Josh Sweat, who we just talked about. He's coming off of a year where he had double-digit sacks, had a great year with the Philadelphia Eagles. Myles Garrett is number 4 on that list. You start seeing some of these other guys. Brian Burns, who you would be surprised, is shows
Mhm.
up in the top 10 on this list. But number 2 on the list. Now, this guy only had 4 sacks last year, but number 2 in terms of time to hit, and also was just after Max Crosby on the get off times. And I was just rolling through all those names. Baron Browning is an edge rusher. Remember, he played off the ball at Ohio State. He was like 6'3,
Yeah.
240. He had 5 sacks for the Denver Broncos last year. But Buck, he's second in terms of time to hit. He had the 5 sacks. His get off is just outside the top 10. So you've got a guy that shows you he's got an elite get off. He can close. He takes an excellent rush path, and he's got a little bit of baby production here. He's got those 5 sacks. So I went through and watched him. So I'm like, let me just go watch the cut up and watch these. Buck, he wins. He wins early. He wins. He wins. He can go through you. Surprising power. Like take about a rush path, direct path. Bam. They use him as a looper. Bam. Close. I mean, I'm like, this dude, like the Denver Broncos might have kind of a secret superstar in the waiting here in a guy like Baron Browning. That was my Easter egg that I discovered this week.
How about that, DJ? Like that's incredible. One, that the stats can lead you to that, and quietly you kind of did a little analytics dive into finding a better
Yeah.
player. And so what you're able to do is what we've said in a perfect world: the people who can take the analytics and marry it with the film study, those are the ones that can go next level. And so there, in uncovering an Easter egg, you found someone who maybe it's a reason why the Broncos were very comfortable with what they had in place on defense. Maybe they knew stuff that we on the outside didn't know in terms of Browning being a guy that can come in and how they can pair him potentially with Randy Gregory and do some of the other things that maybe a creative defensive mind can do. Because remember, Vance Joseph comes over from Arizona to take over that defense, and he hasn't found a blitz that he doesn't like. And so when you think about blitzing to not only win decisively, but to create one-on-one matchups, because that's what you're doing when you blitz. You're trying to get everyone matched up one-on-one. Maybe Browning is the secret sauce. He's a superpower. He has the superpower to be a guy that emerges as a superstar in that defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you find when you kind of go down this path. And like one of the other things I found in there that was fascinating to me, look about all the production that Hassan Reddick had last year. You know,
Mm-hmm.
his teammate Brandon Graham, who had a career year, like kind of under the radar in his mid to upper 30s, double digit sacks with the Eagles. His get off time was the same as Hassan Reddick. Like you would look at those two guys and say, Hassan Reddick undersized. I think he's about 30 plus pounds
Mm-hmm.
lighter than Brandon Graham, obviously younger. But Brandon Graham, like that shows you that to me, when you look at him, he shows up on those lists of somebody who can get off the ball. Doesn't matter what you run a 40. I don't care what you run a 40. Can you get off the rock? He does that and he wins early as well. So that was Sweat and Brandon Graham. And I think we look at Hassan Reddick and all those sacks. Man, they got a
Mm-hmm.
stable. They got a stable of dudes there in Philly.
They got a stable of dudes, and so then my thing would be when you talk to their D line coaches and those things, how much of that is innate and how much of that can be taught? How
Yep.
much can you teach get off? How much are you working get off when you're the Philadelphia Eagles? Are you working get off every day in individual drill? Is that something that you're trying to develop with all of your players when they come in? Hey, we're going to put our hand in the dirt. This is how we get off. This is how we come off low, flat back, all this other stuff. Because to have 3 guys that you talk about kind of like
Yep.
in that close proximity to the list, it's not only athleticism, particularly when you got Brandon Graham, an older player,
Yeah.
there's something that they're doing to help their guys get off the ball quickly.
Well, you know how you say this all the time, and you've talked about this from high school level to college level to the NFL level. Like, hey, you're thinking you're not playing fast. Like, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
are so complex, you cannot play fast. Like, get athletes, find athletes, and make it simple and let them go. And so, my takeaway from that is like, hey, they are an attack front, thinking we'll let the other teams think. We are going to get off the rock and we are going to attack.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense because, gosh, I've heard Dan Quinn talk about that. He talked about back in the Seattle days with Cam Chancellor, they just had a whoop tail defense sometimes. Like, hey, man, look, we're not going to put a lot of scheming in it. Look, we're just going to whoop them. And
Yeah.
sometimes that whooping is like, we're better than you. We're just going to line up and we're just going to out physical you, or we're going to come off the ball and be more explosive than you. And there's something to that, DJ. When you go back and you study all the great coaches in NFL history, the Chuck Knowles, the Don Shulas, the Vince Lombardis, they say the game is not real complicated, man. It's blocking, tackling, it's conditioning, it's playing to the fundamentals. That's what it is. And so, as simple as you can keep it true to those adages, the better chance you have of winning a ton of games. Like, make the game very, very simple for your players, and they're going to respond in kind because they're going to play fast. They're going to know exactly what to do and how to do it.
You know who else plays that way? The Niners. Same philosophy. No, I mean they use the phrase right, rush, crush, close. That's it. Like that's all we're doing. Rush, crush, and close. Read is a 4-letter word. We are not sitting, we are not reading. And if you look at that game between those two teams, look at how they hit the quarterbacks. I know Brock Purdy, they knocked him out of the game. All that, stretch boot and stuff. Buck, they blew it up. They
Yeah,
blew it up.
Yeah,
They
we're
just
not.
went,
We're not.
went to the mesh point. Like, hey, and it's almost like when you watch teams defend zone read. Like we're going to
Mhm.
slow play it. We're going to
No, go. No,
we
you
are
go.
going.
Because what you do when you do that, you flip it. You put the pressure back on the offense. You put the pressure back on the quarterback to make decisive reads in a hurry. And so rather than you slow playing, now the quarterback is having to make quick decisions because you're just going to blow it up. And so yeah, take the pressure off your guys and put it on the opponent. You want to keep the opponent under pressure. And one way that you can do that is by getting a defense and an offense that can play fast. And the only way you can play fast is by simplifying whatever it is you're doing. Not only simplifying the scheme, but simplifying the thoughts that you're giving to your players when they're in their stances.